Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Nada Kraizat. I'm your host for today. And today we are in New York from the InRhythm offices with Godfrey next to me, who will be presenting local first for web development. So we're doing it early today because we have our Christmas party. So thank you all for joining us. And with that being said, Godfrey, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Nader. As Nader said, my name is Godfrey Best. I'm a senior software engineer in the web practice here at InRhythm, and today we're discussing local first development. So many of you are probably asking yourself, what is local first development? Pretty vague name, I'd say. So there are a few key principles that are involved with local first development. The first is offline first. So actually, before I even go into that, let me just give a little bit of an overview of what local first development is. It can be defined as an approach to software development that prioritizes keeping data local and available on the user's device or within their immediate network. The goal is to provide a seamless and responsive user experience, even in situations where the device is offline or has limited connectivity. This approach contrasts with the traditional model, where data is primarily stored and processed on remote servers. So a few of the key principles, the first one is offline first. So applications are designed to function seamlessly without an internet connection, and users should be able to create, modify, and access data locally, and any changes made offline should be synchronized when the device reconnects. Next is local first collaboration. So changes are made locally, and then they're then synchronized with other devices on the cloud, with other devices or the cloud when connection becomes available. This allows us as developers to implement efficient and reliable synchronization mechanisms to ensure that changes made on one device are propagated to others without conflicts or data loss. This often involves using conflict resolution strategies, which I'll touch on a little bit later in the talk. The next principle is data ownership and control. So local first development emphasizes user control and ownership of their data. By storing data locally, users have more control over their information and can decide when and how to share it and with whom. Next is a benefit for user experience. It's performance and responsiveness. So this approach prioritizes a fast and responsive user experience by leveraging local resources. This can include caching data, prefetching relevant information, and minimizing the dependence on remote servers for routine tasks like crowd operations. So some of you might be asking yourself now, why should we care about this at all? You all might be thinking, we're sitting here, many people have 5G internet access. We're fortunate enough to be living in an area where some level of internet access is normally readily available. While this is true most of the time, and most apps operate just fine the majority of the time, you really notice how degraded of an experience you have when there's no internet connection. So some of the issues with most of the existing web apps, I'll give you a little bit of a story. This is a true story that happened a few days ago. So I was sitting at home on my phone with my data. My data was enabled, and I was connected to my home Wi-Fi, which was fine. And I got an email saying that there was an update regarding my health coverage from my health insurance provider. So I clicked the link, I went to the provider's website, and I was met with this beautiful shimmering screen on the right that you see over here. And it was just loading indefinitely. Now, this is a small and only mildly infuriating example, but this is something that happens to people day in and day out. So, and this is because we currently build web applications for a world that is always connected, and it's always connected to a centralized point of failure at a cloud provider. If there are any issues with that provider, then your own data, it's completely inaccessible to you. So another issue is that internet access is unreliable. So in that scenario that I just outlined, I had full internet access, but Another issue that local first development aims to improve is that the world is far from having internet access that is widely available to everybody. Maybe one day we'll have free, always available, high-speed internet covering the entire planet. Whether that planet is Earth or another one that the human race has colonized, it remains to be seen, but my bet is that it's probably not happening on Earth. It probably have to happen on the colony. So until that day comes, I think that local first development can be used to improve the experience of many users by having their data available on their device by default. Another issue that local first development can improve is that connection issues, they degrade the user experience a lot. So I'm sure many of us in our internet travels, we've come across what can only be described as spinner purgatory. So we're excited to go to a website to interact with its page, only to be met with an array of loading spinners or shimmering placeholders. So in an ideal world, we should be able to continue to work on an application, even if we lose internet connection, and expect the application to sync any of our changes we've made with any other devices once it's regained connection. So modern web applications, they generally have a longer runtime than the websites of yesteryear, where we mainly just went to, it's mostly like brochure websites. You went, you got some information, and you left. Today, applications like chat apps, email clients, dashboards, so all these things that are built with web technologies, they're open once, and then they're used over the entire day. So that means that today, latency is often more important than bandwidth when making an application that has a great user experience, because we want the user to experience very snappy responses to their interactions. If your user has to wait for round trips to a server for every button click, this will lead to a very suboptimal user experience. Local first approaches allow us to show the user instant updates and then sync in the background and alert the user if for some reason the sync failed. Okay, so now that you all are excited for local first development, how can we implement it? So the traditional way of doing it is through a progressive web app or a PWA. This is a type of web application that uses modern web APIs to provide an experience similar to that of a native mobile app. Modern browsers have a lot of built-in capabilities that are often underutilized for handling local first development. These include using service workers, which are just scripts that run in the background of web application, separate from the main JavaScript thread. They act as intermediaries between the web page and the network and enable features such as background script execution, caching, and push notifications. IndexedDB is a web browser API that's available in all major browsers and provides a way for web applications to store and retrieve large amounts of NoSQL structured data. So these low-level APIs that the browser provides, they're great, and they're often used in progressive web apps, but there are also libraries that are built on top of these APIs to help make the developer experience a little bit better when you're building these local first apps. So some of these libraries detailed on the bottom right here are open source, others are closed source, but they all aim to help make it easier for application developers to create great local first applications through improving the storage and synchronization of data. Some even make it easier for you to share data between devices without an internet connection using peer-to-peer technology like Bluetooth or WebRTC. Okay, I'm going to switch over to this blog post here. So the underlying concept of many of these libraries, they're built upon a concept called CRDTs. So CRDTs, they stand for conflict-free replicated data type. So what it is, it's essentially a data structure that can be stored on different computers or peers. Each peer can update its own state instantly without a network request, and then check with other peers. So peers have different states at different points in time, but they're guaranteed to eventually converge on a single agreed upon state. That makes CRDTs great for building rich collaborative applications like Google Docs or Figma without requiring a central server to sync these changes. Okay. So in this example here, we just have two like paint canvases, and the two of them are connected using the CRDT technology. And I have the link in the useful links at the end of this talk here. So if people want to go and play around with this, they can go check it out themselves. It goes into great detail on what CRDTs are. So I definitely check it out. So right now I have the latency set to low, and it's like simulating having an internet connection. So you can see that if I write on the left canvas, it shows up immediately on the right. If I write on the right canvas, then it shows up immediately on the left. So now we can simulate if we don't have an internet connection. So you can toggle off this little Wi-Fi icon here. Now, you see here that on the left canvas, this change, it's been saved locally, but there's no internet access, so the right canvas has no knowledge of this change just yet. Okay, what we can do is, if I now make a change on the right canvas, you see, yeah, it's the inverse. So now, if I toggle back on the Wi-Fi or the internet connection, then you see that both canvases immediately get updated with like the current state of things, even though they were not communicating with each other prior. So yeah, so this is really the power of CRDTs. Okay, so now some of you may be wondering, why isn't every web application built this way? So like most things in life, nothing's perfect. There are some potential drawbacks. So the first one, the common question that people normally have, and rightfully so, is if you are storing data on the user's local device, then they're concerned that if that user like loses their device, then all their data will be lost. Now, local first development is not the same as local only. I'm not saying that there is no place for sending data to the cloud or backing up data somewhere. And the hope is just that the data will be stored on the device by default, and then the user has the choice to opt into backing up their data on the cloud or on another device. Handling sensitive data. Storing sensitive data locally, it introduces a different set of security considerations. So IndexedDB does not have encryption built into it. So it'll be up to the developers to implement robust security measures to protect data on user devices, especially in the cases where the user's device might get stolen, lost, or compromised in some way. And I guess in the same vein, we have seen numerous security breaches for cloud providers as well, but the onus of protecting the user's data will shift to the application developer instead. Some devices, they may have limited storage as well, limited storage and processing capabilities. Storing large amounts of data locally can lead to resource constraints, impacting the performance and usability of the application. And then the final one that I would say is a lack of widely adopted solutions. So implementing a truly offline first design requires careful consideration of application architecture to make sure that there are smooth transitions between the online and offline modes, and handling the synchronization between those two settings, you could say. And I believe that the main reason why we haven't seen this become more popular is because the tech giants, they have a larger incentive to collect user data than they have an incentive to improve user experiences. But I also believe that as more users and developers start to see the benefit of owning their own data, I believe we'll continue to make strides in improving the libraries and tooling around this area. Okay, so a few final takeaways. The first is that data ownership is important. I believe that we shouldn't need to trust like legalese and a user service agreement that most people probably never read in order to know that our data, it won't be abused by our applications. Ownership of our data is as important as ownership of our identity online. I'm sure many of us have seen Apple's recent marketing campaigns focused on privacy. Even though they're approaching this from their own cloud provider lens, believe the sentiment that they're sharing is correct. Certain data that's very specific to the user does not need to be shared with the cloud, where it can be dissected and used for profit unless users opt into that. So I hope that from this talk, you all are able to see that if you came into it thinking that like a local first application can only work for like a siloed application that you can't share between like different users or different browsers, that this talk dispelled that notion to you. There are a multitude of libraries out there, YJS being the most popular one, that show that you can create these local first applications that do allow us to collaborate. Yeah. So we've been conditioned to believe that transmitting, storing, and using data can only be done in a centralized manner through a cloud service. But hopefully, we've seen that there are alternatives, and that we should really be building our applications for all the different settings that a user could be using it in. Okay. Now, with that being said, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. When you're looking to build an application, in software engineering, I always say that when the question is, how should you build it? The answer is always, it depends. So especially in the web space, we've seen that the pendulum has swung back and forth between the front end and the back end to determine where we want the bulk of the application responsibility to lie. It just previously was focused on the rendering of the application, but now we see that we can also use it for storing of data for the application as well. There was a tweet from Ryan Florence, who's the creator of the JavaScript framework called Remix and the React library called React Router, that shows that both ends of the spectrum of doing things locally and like relying on a server, both of them, they can really coexist and potentially flourish. Okay. So currently we're starting to see more applications embody this ethos of using local first development. So a couple that I've used and that I really like is the note-taking app called Obsidian, which is built using Electron, and Linear, which is an alternative to Jira. So both of them really push the local first development kind of mantra, where your changes are immediate, happening on the device, and then you can sync it if you want later. Okay, so a couple parting thoughts that I want to leave you all with are these. So the first is there's a point that was made in a talk that I have in the links at the end as well, by a developer named Kyle Simpson. And the point that he was trying to make, and it's a point that I think like deserves to be echoed widely, is that as developers, our time should be spent on should it be spent on choosing size in like the JavaScript framework wars, React or Vue is better, or debating how we should write our CSS, or the evergreen hot button topic of tabs versus spaces, or should our time actually be spent on like, a few different questions? So how our networks are really, what's the best way for us to essentially handle transmitting data across our networks? And so my hope is that with, I guess, AI coding assistants, with them gaining prevalence, that they'll start to handle more of the lower level tasks, and we'll be able to spend more of our time focused on some higher level thinking on the best user experience for all of our users, regardless of their level of internet access. And finally, in the same way that there's the thought that we should build interfaces to be mobile first, I think it's time for us to start thinking about designing and building our applications to be local or offline first. So with that, here's some useful links.
That was awesome, Godfrey. I'm really happy that I was able to join you in person throughout this. And big shout out to our rock star, Kayla in the background, who's always making this happen and making it look easy. And For our InRhythmers, thank you all for a wonderful year of thought leadership. And for our InRhythm community, thank you all. And as always, make sure you join us every Thursday at 5:15 EST, as our next topic is going to be WebAssembly using Rust by Suman. So make sure you join us next time and have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.